Hello friends, Stevie B here. Welcome to part 2 of this video series. We are going to continue to explore the process of writing and mixing an electronic indie pop track using some of the amazing features included in Cubase 14. So in the last video, we put down some basic ideas using the drum machine and the free Halion Sonic synth. If you haven't checked out that video yet, I highly recommend it. But what I want to focus on in this video is the many ways to use the modulators creatively. This is of course one of the new features in Cubase 14 that has been a total game changer for my production process. But before we get into that, let me quickly take you through some of the developments in the arrangement, and I want to show you something that I've added to the track using the drum machine. Let's get into it. All right, cool. So picking up where we left off. In the last video, I put down a few basic ideas. And as you can see here, I've used those same ideas to outline a makeshift arrangement. I added an arrangement track to the session so you can see what I've done. And this probably won't be like the final version, but what I've got here is an intro followed by a chorus. We've got a breakdown, a build up, and then a double chorus. Now I want to bring your attention to this track here called Vocal Chops. Throughout this video, I want to focus mostly on using the modulators, but I have one idea that I've added to this track using the drum machine that I think works pretty well. Let me open this up and show you what these pads sound like. So that's actually all the same sample. My approach for creating this kit was very much the same as the Organic Sounds kit in the last video. I took a small piece of a vocal sample, I believe it's from the Bloom pack. I imported that sample into one of these pads and then duplicated it. And the only thing I changed was the pitch and the pan as well. Some of these are panned a bit right, some are panned a bit left. I've got 3 different patterns for this kit. On their own, it sounds something like this. And in context with everything else. And we'll add some cool processing to these vocal chops later when we get into the mixing. But I thought it would be cool to show you this because, you know, for the most part, my drum machine kits are using like atonal percussive samples. But you can also use like musical samples and approach using drum machine in a more melodic way, like I've done here. So it sounds a little weird in like a cool way. I think it adds a really interesting texture to the chord progression. So let's switch gears here and talk about the modulators. I think a cool place to start would be with some of these percussive layers. And I actually added a few layers here. We're using this ride sample from the Social Jet Lag kit. This is one of the drum machine preset kits. As well as some ambient percussive one-shots, this hats loop, these snaps. All together sounds like this. And these are all being bussed into this percussion group here at the bottom. So one simple thing we can do with these modulators on this percussion group would be to shape the volume around the kick. I want to add that sidechain effect to it. And with the modulators, this is really easy to do. And there's a couple different ways to approach it. So if I have, say, a volume plugin applied to this percussion group, what I could do is say add a shaper modulator. And let's apply this ducker shape. We'll add the connection and we'll just click on this fader. Okay, as you can see, we have it set on bipolar mode. It's going back and forth equally. Let's change that to unipolar. And we want to change the frequency to quarter notes to match our kick. So if I pull my gain way back and have the depth set at 100%, this effect will be, you know, very obvious, probably a little bit too much. But it took no time to set up. And, you know, if we don't like the way our shape sounds, it's super easy to make that adjustment. So listening with the kick. And the benefit of using this volume plugin on the channel strip is that I still have overall control of the volume with the fader on the group. So I like the way that sounds. And like I said, there's different ways to set this up. Let's say I want to apply the same effect on these vocal chops. Let's bring up the modulators on this track. And in this case, I'll choose the envelope follower. And what I'll do here is set up a sidechain source. So just click on this Setup Sidechain Routing button. I'll add my source as the kick. Make sure to press this Activate Sidechaining button. And let's just solo these vocal chops and the kick. Okay, so now you see that we have this envelope shape, which is being triggered by our kick. Let's add a volume plugin on this vocal chops channel, and we'll add our connection the exact same way. I'll just click on this fader. And in this case, you can see that the fader is actually going in the opposite direction of what I want it to do. It's pumping up the volume of these vocal chops every time that kick hits. So all we have to do is just reverse the depth. If I pulled it over to the left, now we see the fader moving down for the kick. I'll keep the attack at 0, and I'll keep the release pretty fast as well. Okay, so that sounds pretty cool. So there's 2 simple ways to sidechain the elements of your track to the kick. One of the key differences, of course, between these 2 approaches is that the envelope follower method that I just showed you with the vocal chops depends on the kick being present in the mix. You'll of course hear the effect disappear once these kicks stop. Whereas the modulator that I applied to the percussion group is consistent with or without the kick in the track. So let's get a little deeper with these modulators and come over to this arpeggiated sequence that I set up using the free Halion Sonic synth, which on its own sounds like this. Not super interesting on its own. Let's use the modulators to shape the sound of it. So maybe what we'll do here is assign this cutoff to a quick control. I could do the same thing for this distortion, assign it to quick control number 2. And if I roll off this cutoff, it sounds like this. And for this track, I'm going to use a step modulator. The step modulator is really useful if you're dealing with like arpeggiated sequences like this. So let's try something like this. We'll take the number of steps down to say 4, and let's just draw them in like so, something like that. Set at 16th notes, perfect. Let's add a connection and I'll choose my filter cutoff. So now you see this filter cutoff knob moving in these quick steps rather than it be like a smooth oscillation. Okay, so this sounds pretty cool. And you know, maybe we add another connection, put it on the filter distortion. So adding a little movement, adding some color to it. Okay, so if I just close this synth here for a second, we've got something that sounds pretty cool here with our modulators, but we can go a lot deeper. Let's open up another modulator slot, and maybe I'll just choose an LFO shape. Let's apply a really slow oscillation, something like that. And what's really cool about the modulators is that you can use one modulator slot to modulate another slot. So for example, if I open up a connection here on slot 2, I can modulate one of the steps on slot 1. Maybe we'll modulate step 1 and 3. And now things are getting really interesting. And I've got an auto filter loaded on this track as well. Let's say we add another connection to the frequency. So we've got this LFO doing a whole bunch of things now, modulating step 1 and 3 on slot 1, gradually opening and closing the filter frequency. And I've got the shimmer plugin loaded on this channel as well. Maybe we throw one last connection to the mix. So as the frequency is opening up, we're pushing into the shimmer mix, and we've got something that sounds like this. And maybe we open one more slot, use the shaper, and shape this arpeggiated synth around the kick as well. So let's use quarter notes. We'll add a connection to our volume fader. Perfect. So we've come a long way from where the sound was originally. The sky's the limit with these modulators. It's just incredibly easy to add some movement and depth to your tracks. So I want to show you one more way that I love to use the modulators, and that's to duck reverb on a vocal. Let me show you how to set this up. So I've got this main and harmony vocal for this track that I've recorded. There's absolutely no processing on either of them right now. One plugin that I would immediately gravitate to for vocals is Vocal Chain. It's just so easy to use for one thing, but it saves me from having to load a compressor, saturator, de-esser as separate plugins. I could do it all within the Vocal Chain plugin, which is super convenient. I'm going to add a bit of compression, add a bit of de-essing, add a bit of brightness with the EQ, carve out some of these low mids, and I'll add a bit of tube saturation as well. And it's sounding pretty good.
We are the shadows cast in the everglow.
Now, oftentimes I'll use the delay or reverb in the vocal chain, but other times I prefer to set up the delay and reverb separately. It kind of depends, but in this case, what I'm going to do is add an effects track. We'll use the Revelation reverb. It'll be easier for me to set this up as an effects send because I've got more than one vocal track. I'm going to send them all into the same reverb. So let's bring up the channel settings on my main vocal and send a bit of this vocal into Revelation.
We are the shadows.
And I've set up a nice long tail here in Revelation, so that sounds pretty cool. The only problem for me is that the reverb is sort of muddying up the clarity of the vocal. So what we can do with the modulators is duck the reverb send based on the vocal input. The way to set that up is we just come to our main vocal. Let's set up a modulator and choose envelope follower. And you'll see this shape here, which is reacting to our vocal input.
We are the shadows.
Let's turn up the gain a bit.
Cast in the everglow.
And if I bring up my channel settings again, let's create a connection to the send gain. And we've got the same problem that we had earlier when we were ducking the vocal chops to the kick. What's happening here by default is that we're pushing this vocal into the send based on the vocal input, but I want to do the opposite. I want the send amount to decrease based on the vocal input. So again, just going to switch the modulation depth. Let's change this to unipolar. Okay, so now we got it doing what I want. The send is ducking when the vocal is present, so we get that upfront clarity from the vocal, and post-vocal, the reverb send gradually releases to where it's at right here, so we get that nice long tail. And it makes a massive difference. So this is what it sounds like with the effect bypassed.
We are the shadows. Cast in the everglow.
Okay, and with the ducking,
we are the shadows. Cast in the everglow. Chase.
So we get the best of both worlds here. We get that intimacy from the vocal. It's not super washed out in reverb, but we also get that nice long tail at the end. Okay, and one last thing here is that we can save this modulator preset. We can just, call it reverb ducking. And then I can come over here to my harmony track. We'll choose the envelope follower and let's load that same preset. I'll add the connection to the send. And there you go, it's that easy.
All my fault lines lead me to the bowl of the tide.
So I'll leave you with a few other elements that I've added to this track other than the vocals. I'm using a pad here from Colors Free. I'm using a Celesta from the Iconica Sketch Library. All freebies. We've got a bass track. This is something I've also created using Hellion Sonic. We've got some vocal harmonies. And what we've got here so far is just a really quick basic mix. In the next video, we'll fully mix and master this track. But it's been really fun to kind of mess around with the modulators and shape these elements.
All my fault lines lead me to the bowl of the tide. Lost in your eyes, your words linger in my mind. I'm on the other side.
All right, cool. So our track is slowly taking shape. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found that helpful. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, and I hope you'll check out part 3 of this series because we are going to add all the final touches and we're gonna mix this track. Very excited for that. So in the meantime, hit that like button for me, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.